Aloha, and welcome to another edition of A Better Day. I'm State Senator Sam Slom, your Senate Minority Leader, and for the next few minutes, we're going to review what happened during the 27th State Legislative Session, which ended May 1st, talk a little bit about what's going on in the interim, and talk about the upcoming elections and the importance of those elections to you and for your involvement. Well, first of all, did you come down to the Capitol this year during the session? You know, a lot of people were really exercised and excited and frustrated during the special session that we had in October and November of 2013. And many of them vowed to come down to the legislature, and some did. But unfortunately, a lot did not. And the problem is, a lot of people took the attitude that their vote didn't count, that they couldn't fight City Hall, that they couldn't make a difference. Well, those things are not true. All of the things are just exactly the opposite. Your vote, every vote does count. You talk to the people that have won or lost by a few votes. Talk to the people that have been influenced by a number of people that have stayed the course and remained consistent. So you can make a difference. If you don't register to vote, if you don't get involved, if you don't run as a candidate or help a candidate, then you're right. Then your vote doesn't count and nothing changes. And that's a big thing in Hawaii. You know, we had a presidential candidate back in 2008 who promised us hope and change. Well, I think we're still hoping for a lot of things, but Hawaii changes very little. You know, when we have people in office for 40, 50, 60 years, when we have the same political party controlling and dominating for 50 or 60 years, then you don't get much thinking outside the box. You don't get much change. And the funny thing is, the public, they blame everybody except themselves for not being involved and not taking over that responsibility of citizenship. Because it is your responsibility as a citizen to make those changes and to keep all of us, I mean all of us, with our feet to the fire. Make sure that you know what we're doing. If you don't like what we're doing, get rid of us. Now, I know that part of the problem is this lack of empowerment in the state of Hawaii. And I've talked about this on previous programs, and that is we're the only state in the union that does not have either statewide initiative, referendum, recall, or term limits. And that does make it difficult. Initiative, of course, is the process if your legislator or legislature doesn't initiate certain kinds of bills or programs that you believe in, then, like many other states, you have the ability to do that yourself, to initiate legislation. You get enough signatures, you get that particular bill to be heard by the legislature and to be voted upon by the people. Now, a lot of people say that's really messy, and they point to California where they have dozens and dozens and dozens of initiatives. And it's true, it can be messy, but that's what democracy is all about. Better to be messy and have empowerment than to be neat and clean and done behind closed doors and not have any empowerment. Another bill is referendum. And referendum means that there are certain key issues that even though the legislature passes them, because the burden is going to be on the taxpayers, the final responsibility is that there be a referendum or a vote by the people to authorize it. Usually in other states, this has to do with major issues of land development or taxation, or changes in school curriculum, these things which the people ultimately will bear responsibility for, but just a handful of individuals in the legislature actually make those changes. Well, that's referendum. Recall, I remember a lot of people that came down during the special session at the end of last year, and they were very frustrated. They were frustrated because after all the people that came down here, more than 10,000, which was a record number, not one vote changed in the primary issue of same-sex marriage. The votes were forecast before the session started, and when people actually voted, it was exactly the same. So these folks felt that they didn't have any input or made any changes at all. More than that, though, they found, can you believe this, that some legislators, they found to be arrogant or aloof, or not to even listen to them or want to hear what they had to say. So they said to people like me, how do we recall that particular senator or that representative? And I had to tell them sadly again, Hawaii is one of those states that does not have statewide recall, and you can't do it. So it looks a little bleak. No initiative, No referendum, no recall. By the way, I've introduced those bills each year since I've been in the legislature, in the Senate, since 1997. Some years we get hearings. None of them have ever passed. This year, we didn't even get hearings. The fourth item is term limits, and that's more controversial. Even some of my political party colleagues, they don't like the idea of having a set number of years to serve or terms. Well, I do. I support it because, look, this is not supposed to be a profession. This is not supposed to be a job. It's not supposed to be a career with ever-increasing salary and retirement benefits and lifelong health benefits and all of that. It's supposed to be public service. And so a long time ago, naively, I presented ideas that, hey, why don't we do it by a lottery system? And we put your name in, just like we do for, motor vehicle registration, which results in jury notification, and we pull the name out, and you're going to serve either in the House or the Senate for a particular time period. Maybe it's 6 years or 8 years or 10 years, whatever it is, that's fine. You don't get a pension. You don't get lifelong health care. You get to serve, and then you leave, and then your neighbor gets to serve too. Well, I was told it was a stupid idea. It was a naive idea. My gosh, you'd get housewives and you'd get garbage collectors. What's wrong with housewives and garbage collectors? They do a meaningful service today, and in each of their families, they have to have a budget that they adhere to. So this idea of we've got to have professional politicians and they've got to serve for 30, 40, 50 years or we will lose their institutional knowledge, I think is bunk. I haven't used that word in a long time. But we don't need that. What we need are people that understand the rigors of life, the problems of the economy, raising children, going through the public education system, having to deal with career bureaucrats in government, fighting the potholes and transportation problems and all that. We need, in other words, normal, everyday people to do those things. Well, I don't know. What do you think? You can tell me. Is it really a dumb idea? Should we have only those people that have the ability to get elected, that have the ability to raise large sums of money to run for office? Or should we open it up more? Or the least, to have more empowerment of people, such as initiative, referendum, recall, and term limits? Let me know. I'd be glad to hear what you think. Anyway, the final days of the 27th state legislature that ended May 1st, the final days were really chaotic. In fact, we got to a Friday afternoon when all of the bills were due. They had to pass in order to be positioned for a final vote. And we were all up in room 309 when all of the different conference committees were coming together for the last time. The idea was there were bills, there were very technical bills, and there were very key bills that had not passed yet. And could they pass by our 6 p.m. deadline? A lot of excitement. All the media were present. All the legislators were present, it seems, except 2 state senators. Two state representatives. One was the education representative, Representative Roy Takumi. The other was the education state senator, and that was Jill Takuda. And they were meeting in a separate conference room across the hall. They were conducting their business, trying to reach agreement on their bills. And when they finally found out, I guess they didn't get the memo, that everybody was meeting across the hall in room 309, they rushed over. 6 o'clock came, and their bills did not pass. Senator Takuda was very upset about that. A number of other people had bills that didn't pass. They were less upset, but not to worry. That was on a Friday. The next day, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President met, and they decided they were going to change the rules. Hey, that's what we do down here. We have rules, but sometimes we waive the rules. Sometimes we exempt the rules. Sometimes we change the rules, and sometimes we just break the rules. That's what we can do. And that's why it's important for you to pay attention to what we do and how we do it. In any event, there were conference committees scheduled after the deadline. Bills were passed and positioned, and they were voted on, and we did get out of here on time May 1st. But it just goes to show you that if you have 13 votes in the Senate out of 25, you can do anything you want to do. Change any rule, make any waiver, or bring back things that apparently were dead. And the same is true out of the 51 members in the State House. You've got 26 members, and you call the shots. That's why it's important for you to stay involved, stay engaged. Well, one of the things that came out the final hours of the 27th state legislature, and by the way the legislature works, just as a reminder to you, is that really it's a 2-year legislature. And in the odd number, which will be next year, 2015, it'll be the start of the 28th state legislature. The odd number, the main thing is passing the 2-year operating budget. And then the following year, which is still part of that legislative number, you have a supplemental budget to supplement or make changes in the budget. Bills that are introduced in the first year of a 2-year session that don't get passed, they're still technically alive. And so they can come back. They may have been in hearing, they may have been in conference committee. They're basically still alive. What we always tell everyone and want you to know, nothing is either passed or dead until final action has been taken or until we leave, the gavel comes down, sine die, or sine die if you want to be really Latin and Italian taken care of. Until we're out of there, anything is possible, anything can happen. And in the past, it has happened. One of those things had to do with the preservation of the lands around Turtle Bay on the north shore of Oahu, specifically Cavella Bay. This had been an object of legislation and discussion for a number of years. In fact, going back to the Linda Lingle administration, that administration had a proposal to actually condemn the land, have the state take over the property, the Turtle Bay, hotels and golf courses and private recreational areas. After that period of time, and with Governor Abercrombie, there was more emphasis on negotiation and trying to reach a deal to either buy the lands or to take over the lands, in other words, to keep them out of further development. Well, what happened was there was an agreement that was struck. There was a task force. We love our task forces here. Whenever there's a problem, we have a committee, a study, a task force. You don't have that in your home. You don't have that in your business. You don't have that ability. If you have to make a decision, as tough as it may be, you've got to make it. And maybe you make the wrong decision, but you've got to do it. But the legislature can take plenty of time and delay. Well, anyway, what happened was there was a proposal for Turtle Bay. And the proposal was that the state, the city and county of Honolulu, and a preservation organization were going to pony up money, a total of over $48 million, to pay to Turtle Bay to secure an easement, not ownership of the land, but an easement. And that easement, theoretically, would keep that land out of any future development, and so therefore it would be preserved. You know, the state of Hawaii has bought or preserved a lot of land. A couple things happen with that. It's a good idea to keep these open spaces, to be sure, but some of the projects, if you looked at them from a business or an economic standpoint, they really don't hold water. For example, there's a lot of money involved, and if you preserve the land, first of all, you're taking it out of tax revenue generation, because the owners of this land right now, before it's preserved, they have to pay for it. They have to pay taxes and they have to pay other uses. Secondly, when we preserve land or we take it over, there's a cost of maintaining that land. Again, if you have land in private hands, the private owners must preserve and protect and take care of that land. Do they want to develop further? Absolutely. But that goes through the zoning process, and there are hearings and there are things to say yes or no or modification. Once the state takes over land, which it has done in great measure, then, as I say, it's got the responsibility for maintaining it. And unfortunately, the state's ability to maintain things has not been very good at all. So those are things that were under consideration. And as a result of that, no bill was shown to the public. There were no public hearings, but at the last minute, a solution was cobbled together, and it is the most ludicrous of solutions if you look at it from a business or an economic or legal standpoint. There may be a legal challenge to what actually passed, and that is take a little bit of money from the refinancing of bonds from the convention center, issue new bonds, have an easement, get the state to parlay money, get the city and county to parlay money, get the private organization to do all of this. Now, Turtle Bay seems perfectly happy because they would be the recipient of the $48 million. But hold on a minute. That depends on these revenue bonds being issued, and it depends on whether or not the process has been legal. As I say, it was rushed at the last minute. You ask your legislator, hey, Tom, hey, Malia, explain to me the Turtle Bay bill. Tell me how it works and how it's going to be financed. After a lot of it's going to be really difficult to do that. Well, that was just one instance. We spent a lot of money this year, your money. In fact, I describe the budget not as a budget bill, but as a spending bill. It's a bill that increases spending. You heard people talk about, oh, we cut the governor's budget, we reduced this, we reduced that. Let's keep that in perspective. You have a base budget, and that's the base budget at this level. The governor comes in with his executive budget, and it's up here. The House starts trimming, and they trim around in this area, and maybe the Senate trims a little bit too, and they get together in a conference. But guess what? At the end of the day, they're still above what that spending was last year. They're still issuing more bonds. They're still creating more debt. And right now, the taxpayers in this state are paying about 20%, or 1/5 of the budget in total, on what's called debt service. And debt service is simply repaying the principal with interest on the debt that's accrued through issuance of bonds. So all of this has gone up. So when people tell you, or you hear, oh my gosh, the budget was cut dramatically and these poor organizations lost funding or had reduced funding, or we lost inspectors, or we lost this, or we lost that. We didn't lose that. We still had increases in expenditures. Now, where the money goes and the priority, that's a different thing. And what's happened the last 2 years, the administration and the legislature have tried to put back the numbers of people and the kinds of agencies and spending that was reduced when we had a very serious financial problem in the last several years. But make no mistake, the money goes up. Our 2-year supplemental budget that was passed this year was nearly $24 billion. That's a hunk of change. Oh yeah, I voted against it. I think I was the only one in the legislature. I think the vote was 75-1. Now look, there are a lot of good things in the budget, but sometimes you have to stand up and you have to say, wait a minute, we got to change the direction that we're going in, because if we do, there are going to be more hardships for Hawaii's families and small businesses. And so we haven't made changes. We didn't say, okay, we've been doing this a certain way for so many years, but starting now, or even in a year or two, we're giving you warning, we're giving you notice, we're going to start doing it differently. We haven't done that. We still gave outrageous salary and benefit increases to unions. We still gave subsidies to the Hawaii State Hospital system, which has been running in deficit for 15 years or longer and hasn't changed. Look, as long as they can come back to the legislature, not do anything, and beg for more money, especially emergency appropriations, they don't have to change. The University of Hawaii, my alma mater, the legislature made a number of very serious recommendations, not to micromanage, but to have oversight and get the university back on a financial track. They haven't done it. And again, they don't have to, because they come to the legislature, and even with problems of procurement, with waste, possible corruption, a lot of things that are undone, we still give them more money. Oh, I should say you do. Now remember, down here at the legislature, we spend a lot of time patting ourselves on the back, and we have a lot of people thanking us for the money. But it's you, the taxpayers, that pay for all this. There's nobody else. We don't have any money unless we take it first from you. So we look at those things. By the way, in addition to that $24 billion supplemental operating budget, we have a capital improvements budget. We have a budget for the judiciary. We have a budget for OHA, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which, let me remind you, is a state agency. It's not independent. Then we have additional appropriations bills like collective bargaining for the unions. So there's a lot more money. And then when all of that is said and done, we still have what's known as our unfunded liability. And that's money that's owed for the state health plan and for the state employees retirement system. And guess who pays that? You do. You're on the hook for that too. It's called an unfunded liability because there's no money for it, but it is a liability. It's a direct charge. It's just like in bankruptcy. There's a pecking order of who gets paid first or who's liable first. And the taxpayers are always liable. You're liable for general obligation bonds. You're liable for unfunded liabilities. You're liable for specific legislation. So some of us, a very few of us, stand up and constantly talk about you've got to make these changes or we vote no on these bills. It's not to be contrary. It's not just to pick a fight. It's that we really believe in what we're saying, and we want to let the public know what the consequences are. Even the state finance director has said, looking at the financial plan that was just passed this year, if nothing significant changes for the positive, the state of Hawaii is going to be cash broke in the year 2017. Now, that's not very far away. I mean, we're halfway through 2014 already. 2017, unless there are major tax increases on the second highest tax state in the union, the money is not there. We're not improving our business climate. We're not increasing the number of businesses. Far from it. We're losing businesses. We're losing jobs. We're creating more debt. So where does the money come from? The state, the government has only one source, and that's the taxpayers. How about taxing the rich, making them pay their fair share? Look, the rich, those few among us who are really, truly rich, they pay the vast majority of the taxes now. They provide for the welfare in the state. So we have an opportunity to take a look, a serious look, between now and November with the elections and now and next January before the next legislative session. We've got to look at things, the way they are operated or mismanaged, the way they cost. What's going on during the interim? Hey, we still have hearings. We still have briefings. I'm on the Special Investigative Committee that is investigating abuses for workers at the state hospital. That'll continue probably all summer. We'll be looking continuously at the Hawaii Health Connector, which to me is the worst thing that is facing us right now from a financial standpoint. The connector brags that 8,500 people were signed up for this connector. The original estimate last year was 100,000, and then it was reduced to 50,000, and we wound up with 8,500 at a cost of over $204 million from the federal government, and now the state wants to increase the spending by $15 million and make the state responsible for the health connector. What is the connector? It is another level of bureaucracy between you and getting your insurance. We used to brag because we had 98% of all people insured in the state of Hawaii under the Prepaid Health Care Act. But now we have a bureaucracy that doesn't work, can't work, is not sustainable, but can tax you. Interesting that the head of HMSA, Hawaii's largest medical insurance provider, who was a big supporter of creating the connector and was an initial beneficiary, Mr. Gold, who is the president of HMSA, came out and said, we've got to dismantle it, we've got to stop it. It's a bad thing. But the folks that support it will continue to go down with that ship and take us with it unless we speak up. So we've got a campaign that's underway now. Boy, doesn't it seem that everybody's running for office? You see signs everywhere. People are out on the streets, sign waving now. A reminder that our primary is earlier now. It's August of this year, August 9th, and then the general election is November. We're going to have all these candidates running for office. We've got some interesting races. In the Senate alone, we've got 4 senators that are running for office. David Ige, who is Ways and Means Chairman and did such a wonderful job for a number of years, he's now running for governor against the incumbent, Neil Abercrombie. We've got the Senate President, Donna Kim. She's running for a U.S. House seat. There are currently 9 people running for that, including State Senator Will Asparo and also State Representative Mark Takai. So you've got a lot of people that are running for office. And some people said that was kind of a conflict of interest during the session. How could they be campaigning and at the same time running and keeping their positions? Well, that's something that maybe you, the voters, will ask of us in the future. You're also going to have 5 constitutional issue questions on the ballot. So now is the time to learn about these things, learn about the candidates. Please, please don't vote for a candidate because you like their last name, or you like what high school they graduated from, or you like who they're married to, or who their, girlfriend or boyfriend is. Ask them the tough questions about taxes and Turtle Bay and health connectors and budgets and things like that. That's the important thing to do. Well, we're going to be on the job, even though this is a part-time legislature. We still have things to do, and this is the time to meet with and talk to your legislator, and particularly if he or she is running for election or re-election. Remember, all 51 members of the state House are up for election. 12 of the 25 state senators are up for election. Ask them now. They can't hide and talk about how busy they are at the session. This is your time. This is our time. As always, my office, the Senate Minority Office, we're open to help you. Our door is always open. We have several different websites to give you information. If you have a question about a particular problem or bill that you're interested in, or you want something introduced next January, come see us now. This is the time to talk about it. And by the way, this area of transparency, everybody talks about it, but in many ways we're not as transparent as we used to be. The good news is we do have a good website, hawaii.gov, and it's easier to navigate and get information, but it still takes some work. And that's what you have to do as a citizen. You've got the responsibility to do that work. So I stand ready to help you. I may hold the record for no votes, but 90% of my votes are with the majority, are bipartisan votes. The main thing is, whatever we do, we want to do it for the future of Hawaii, for your children, for your grandchildren. You've come to me. You visited with me. You said that's what's important. Many of you are tired because you fought the battles before, but the battle's never over. But the good news is we can look forward to a positive Hawaii because we have good people and good resources. We don't want it to be just another day. We want it to be a better day. This is State Senator Sam Slom. Thank you for joining me, and have a wonderful day. Aloha.